Hello, House Church, and welcome to Side Week. On Sunday, we started a new series on the book of Jonah, and we saw how Jonah was invited into God's story, but ran in the opposite direction. And we also saw how that led to these significant consequences, the storm that blows up onto the sea as God pursues him. You know, as I was looking at the text this week, one of the light bulbs that came for me was recognizing the way that my relationship with God is not a purely personal thing. That it's not just something that's that's good for me and makes me feel better, but there are these significant consequences to my obedience and disobedience. And we see that throughout the story of Jonah. Whether it's the sailors who are on the sea with Jonah in the midst of the storm, or whether it's the Ninevites who God wants to restore and bless. Our relationship with God is not a purely personal thing. It's got some really important implications for us that we can talk about at House Church. When I think about the question mark that comes out of this text for me this week, I think about that scene where Jonah is in the midst of the storm and the sailors are crying out to their gods and throwing things overboard, and we find Jonah asleep in the bottom of the boat. And the question that comes is kind of an uncomfortable question, but the question is, man, are there ways that I'm asleep in the boat? That in the midst of everything that's going on around me and the needs that would be around me, the people that I come into contact with, are there ways that I just live disengaged and disinterested, just focused on myself and my own little world? That's a good thing for us to be talking about as we gather for House Church this week. You know, if we find that there have been ways that we have failed or faltered, that could lead to some pretty deep discouragement for us, like it did for Jonah. But God wasn't done with Jonah in this story. This great fish appears not to destroy Jonah, but actually to be the means towards restoration for Jonah. And then through Jonah, restoration for the Ninevites. He's the God of surprising second chances. And so the arrow for me is to trust in this God of surprising second chances. That in those places where I feel like I have failed, where it might be too late, where I'm too far gone, God's not done with me in those places. It's not too late to have that conversation with a neighbor. And it's not too late to dig into that relationship that we've been avoiding or to send that email. Maybe you can spend some time in your house church talking about the second chances that God's offering to you this week. Hey, have a great week. Blessings as you gather with your house church.